Imagine opening your morning newspaper and seeing a letter from a killer, signed with a strange circle and cross symbol, threatening more deaths unless his coded message is printed for the entire city to see. No name, no face, just a taunt, a puzzle, and the promise of more blood. That was Northern California in the late 1960s, when a phantom who called himself Zodiac began hunting young couples and terrorizing San Francisco. Police chased him, reporters amplified him, amateurs obsessed over him. And yet, more than 50 years later, the one question that matters most, who was the Zodiac Killer, remains unanswered. In this video, we're not just retelling a story of horror, we're dissecting a live, still open mystery. From brutal crime scenes to encrypted letters and controversial suspects, we'll decode the legend and the reality behind America's most elusive serial killer. Stay with me, because the clues are more chilling than the myths. To understand the Zodiac Killer, we have to step into a very specific time and place, late 1960s Northern California. The summer of love had just washed over San Francisco. The Vietnam War raged on TV screens. Social norms were breaking down, and with them came a new cultural fascination and fear around random, senseless violence. Out of this chaos emerged a predator who seemed to understand mass media better than anyone. He used newspapers like his personal stage, taunting police and public alike, turning murder into a performance. In this video, we'll break the case into clear chapters. The confirmed attacks, the infamous letters and ciphers, the investigation's biggest failures, psychology and victimology, leading suspects, and the latest forensic efforts that might finally crack his identity. This isn't about glorifying a killer. It's about critically examining how one anonymous man paralyzed a region, and why he still haunts our imagination today. Let's start with what we know for sure: the attacks. The first incident widely linked to Zodiac happened on December 20th, 1968, on Lake Herman Road near Vallejo. Teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were parked on a lover's lane when someone approached, ordered them out, and opened fire. There were no taunting letters yet, just a brutal, seemingly motiveless double murder. 7 months later, on July 4th, 1969, another young couple, Darlene Farron and Mike Magot, were shot in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park. This time, the killer called police from a payphone, calmly claiming responsibility and referencing the earlier attack. Moments like that phone call are crucial. He craved recognition. These early crimes set the template: isolated victims, sudden gun violence, a quick escape, and hinted at an offender who mixed planning with impulse. But the public still didn't know his name or the symbol that would soon terrify California. On August 1st, 1969, everything changed. 3 major Bay Area newspapers received nearly identical letters, each beginning, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas." Enclosed with each letter was one piece of a 408-character cipher, Zodiac's first public puzzle. He demanded the cipher be printed on the front page, threatening more killings if ignored. This move transformed 2 local murders into a media spectacle. The coded message was solved not by police but by a schoolteacher, Donald Hardin, and his wife, Betty. The decrypted text was chilling, a rambling monologue about enjoying killing, collecting slaves for the afterlife, and a disturbing lack of remorse. Yet, notably, the killer's identity was not in the message, despite his promise. With those letters, the unknown gunman became Zodiac, a self-styled villain who realized he could manipulate fear using ink as effectively as bullets. While his letters exploded in the press, Zodiac continued to attack. On September 27, 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa when a man wearing an eerie executioner-style hood and a chest symbol approached them with a gun. He claimed to be an escaped convict needing a car, then bound them with pre-cut clothesline before savagely stabbing them. Before leaving, the attacker calmly walked to their car and wrote details of his previous crimes on the door, signing with the now famous circle and cross. Cecilia later died from her wounds. Brian survived to describe the attacker in chilling detail. Just weeks later, on October 11, 1969, Zodiac shot cab driver Paul Stine in San Francisco's Presidio Heights. This attack broke his pattern: a male victim, urban setting, and close brush with responding officers. Taken together, these scenes revealed a killer who evolved, experimented, and relished public attention. Zodiac's physical violence was horrifying, but his psychological warfare might have been even more devastating. Across several years, he sent at least 20 confirmed letters and cards to newspapers, attorneys, and even private citizens. These weren't random ramblings, they were carefully crafted performances. He mocked police as blue pigs, threatened to shoot school children, and boasted of imaginary body counts. He sprinkled in pop culture references, astrology symbols, and odd misspellings that may have been deliberate misdirection. Each envelope became an event. Reporters rushed to analyze handwriting, stamps, and paper fibers. Cryptographers hunted for hidden meanings. Some letters contained more ciphers, like the still unresolved 340-character code mailed in 1969, finally cracked only in 2020 by a team of amateur code breakers. That message didn't reveal his name either, but it did confirm his craving for notoriety. The letters turned Zodiac from a local killer into a national obsession, embedding his symbol into American true crime lore. Those ciphers are central to Zodiac's legend. The first one, the 408-character cipher, was solved relatively quickly using frequency analysis and pattern recognition. But the infamous 340-character cipher, often called the Z340, resisted experts for over 50 years. In December 2020, a trio of civilian code breakers from the US, Belgium, and Australia cracked it using custom software and linguistic intuition. The solution revealed a mix of phrases like, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me," and a reference to a TV show about a psychic, echoing Zodiac's media awareness. Crucially, it confirmed that his earlier promise to reveal his identity in cipher form was a lie. Other codes, like the Z13 and Z32, remain officially unsolved and might be too short or intentionally unsolvable. Were the ciphers deep psychological signatures or just games for attention? Either way, they transformed a homicide investigation into one of history's most famous puzzles. Despite the myth of the hyper-intelligent supervillain, the Zodiac investigation was messy, human, and full of missed opportunities. Multiple agencies, Vallejo Police, Napa County Sheriff, San Francisco PD, and the FBI, struggled with coordination in an era before centralized databases and instant communication. Witness descriptions varied. Evidence handling was sometimes sloppy by today's standards, and promising leads hit jurisdictional walls. At Presidio Heights, responding officers likely saw the killer walking away, but were initially given the wrong race description, allowing him to slip past. Handwriting analysis, then in its relative infancy, produced conflicting opinions about which letters were authentic. Media leaks complicated strategy. Every public detail fed both community fear and copycats. Meanwhile, thousands of tips and hundreds of suspects overwhelmed detectives. The result was a haunting paradox. A high-profile case with enormous public pressure, but no single, cohesive investigative command to steer efforts over decades. So who was Zodiac targeting, and why? Most of his confirmed attacks were on young couples in secluded areas, classic lover's lane scenarios. That suggests a resentment toward intimacy, youth, or perceived rejection, common in certain offender profiles. Yet his final known victim, Paul Stine, was a random cab driver in a busy city neighborhood, which complicates any neat psychological theory. Zodiac also claimed many more victims in his letters than police could verify, possibly inflating his body count for ego. Some profilers see him as a socially isolated, intelligent, but underachieving white male, likely in his late 20s to early 40s at the time, with familiarity with firearms, basic ciphers, and the Bay Area's geography. His costume at Lake Berryessa and theatrical letters point to someone who enjoyed role-playing and dominance. Still, without a confirmed identity, every profile is an educated guess, shaped as much by what we don't know as by the evidence we do. Over the decades, certain names have dominated Zodiac discussions. The most famous is Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester and Navy veteran from Vallejo. Allen owned a watch branded Zodiac, talked about wanting to hunt couples, and was pointed to police by multiple acquaintances. He lived near early crime scenes and allegedly made cryptic, disturbing comments. Yet his handwriting didn't conclusively match. Fingerprints were inconclusive, and later DNA from some stamps and envelopes didn't tie him to the letters. Another major suspect is Lawrence Kane, a salesman with documented brain injuries, a history of stalking, and a physical resemblance to police sketches. Former Detective Harvey Hines built an extensive case on him, but nothing definitive emerged. There are many others: teachers, ex-military, even fringe theories linking Zodiac to other infamous criminals. Each suspect seems to fit some pieces of the puzzle, but none lock perfectly into place. That uncertainty fuels endless debate. Modern forensics has transformed cold cases, but Zodiac keeps slipping through our fingers. DNA technology, which helped identify the Golden State Killer in 2018, raised hopes that a similar genetic genealogy approach might expose Zodiac. Partial DNA profiles have been extracted from some letters, but contamination, degradation, and questions about which mailings are truly authentic complicate everything. The killer might not have licked the stamps himself, or later handling could have overwritten his genetic trace. Fingerprints and palm prints from crime scenes also failed to deliver a clear match. Recently, groups like the Case Breakers and independent sleuths have claimed to identify Zodiac using facial analysis, property records, and alleged cipher solutions. So far, law enforcement remains unconvinced, emphasizing that public announcements are not the same as prosecutable evidence. The harsh reality is that even if Zodiac's name is quietly known today, the standard for proof in a court of law is far higher than internet certainty. Culturally, the Zodiac Killer became more than a criminal. He became a symbol. Films like David Fincher's Zodiac, books, podcasts, and online forums have kept the case alive for new generations. Part of the enduring fascination is the combination of horror and puzzle. It feels like a story we might still be able to solve. But there's a darker side. Media coverage in the late 1960s arguably rewarded Zodiac's desire for attention, reading his every letter on front pages and TV broadcasts. Today, online communities sometimes drift into hero worship or reckless accusations against private individuals. It forces an uncomfortable question. When we obsess over an unidentified killer, are we seeking justice and understanding, or indulging a morbid curiosity that the killer himself wanted? Balancing public interest, historical importance, and respect for victims is crucial if we're going to keep examining this case ethically. One aspect often overlooked is the human cost beyond the headlines. Families of Betty Lou Jensen, David Faraday, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein lived through decades of sensational coverage, while still lacking closure. Survivors like Brian Hartnell have had to carry lifelong trauma, periodically reawakened whenever a new documentary or suspect theory goes viral. Retired detectives who worked the case describe it as a personal failure that followed them into old age. Every new claim of solving Zodiac can reopen old wounds, especially when evidence is thin. At the same time, ongoing interest keeps the case files from gathering dust, maintaining pressure for official reviews and technological re-examination. The core tension remains. How do we honor the victims and their families while exploring a mystery that has become global entertainment? Any serious discussion of Zodiac must keep those very real people at the center, not just the faceless symbol he drew. Let's pull the threads together. The Zodiac Killer case sits at the intersection of violent crime, media, psychology, and cryptography. We know a handful of confirmed attacks and a series of letters from a man who carefully constructed a persona. One part boastful predator, one part puzzle maker. We've seen how fragmented investigations, limited 1960s technology, and interagency rivalries left gaps that may never fully close. Attempts to profile Zodiac suggest a socially alienated, control-driven offender, but without a proven identity, every theory is provisional. Modern forensics and citizen sleuthing have generated promising leads and sensational claims, yet official confirmation remains elusive. What endures is the case's cautionary value. It warns us about the power of fear, the seduction of unsolved mysteries, and the importance of centering victims over villains. Unmasking Zodiac may or may not ever happen, but understanding the case can still teach us a great deal about ourselves. If you've stayed with this story to the end, you're clearly someone who cares about more than just shock value. You're interested in how and why these mysteries shape our world. So, here's what you can do next. First, if you found this deep dive helpful, hit like so the algorithm knows to push thoughtful, true crime content over sensational clickbait. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more long-form breakdowns of notorious cases, focusing on evidence, ethics, and context, not just gore. Second, if you plan to dig into Zodiac forums or books, remember the real people at the center of this case. Be skeptical of bold claims, demand sources, and avoid spreading unverified accusations about living individuals. Finally, drop a comment. Which part of the Zodiac case fascinates or disturbs you most? The ciphers, the suspects, or the investigative missteps? I read through your insights, and they'll help shape future episodes on other enduring mysteries.